Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, in the Big 12 on Saturday, there's a game between the Texas Longhorns traveling on the road at the Kansas Jayhawks. Who do I think is going to win this game? Let's break it down. Now, Texas is 6-4 and 4-3 in the Big 12 to start this season, and Steve Sarkisan's done a decent job at Texas, and he's in his second season. But obviously, Texas fans want more than what they have done so far. And they've had a decent season so far, and they beat UL Monroe 52-10 in Week 1. And that was a good win. But then they lost in a heartbreaker to Alabama 20-19. This was a game they could have easily won, but Quinn Ewers got hurt, and they could not get it done. And then they beat UTSA 41-20. That was a good win. But then they lost at Texas Tech in overtime 37-34. This was a tough loss because Bijan Robinson fumbled the ball in overtime, and that caused Texas to lose that game. And then they beat West Virginia 38-20, and that was a good win. Then they won 49-0 against Oklahoma, and that was a great win for Texas because they beat their rivals by the most points than they've done ever, and that was a fantastic win for Texas. And then they won against Iowa State 24-21. That was a good win. But then they lost at Oklahoma State 41-34. Not a bad loss, but Oklahoma State is struggling a little bit this season. But still, Texas tried in this game. And then they beat Kansas State on the road 34-27. That was a good win because Kansas State's playing really well this season. And then they lost to TCU 17-10 at home. Tough loss because they could have beaten TCU if they could have just gotten their offense going, but Texas just could not get anything going. Quarterback Quinn Ewers at 171 yards and interception, and he has not been the same guy since his injury. He's a really talented player. We know what Quinn Ewers can do, but he's really been struggling lately, and he needs to regain his pre-injury form for Texas if Texas is going to be able to achieve what they want to in the future. Running back Bijan Robinson at only 29 yards against TCU. That's not very good because Bijan Robinson's a great tailback, but he did not get any yards going against TCU. So Bijan Robinson's going to have to be able to run more against Kansas if they're going to find a way to beat him. Wide receiver Jordan Whittington is 78 yards. He's a really good wide receiver for Texas. And on the defensive side of the ball, defensive back Ryan Watts at 5 tackles and linebacker Barron Sorrell at 4 tackles for Texas against TCU. And Texas's whole team is inconsistent. Their defense and their offense is really talented, but at times their offense and defense can both struggle. So if they can get both sides of the ball cleaned up, then I think Texas can start winning more games. Now on the Kansas side, they're 6-4 and 3-4 in the Big 12 to start this season, and Lance Leipold's done a fantastic job as the Kansas head coach. He's really turned the program around from when Kansas struggled to win a game, and they're having a great season for Kansas standards. They beat Tennessee Tech 56-10 in Week 1. That was a good win. Then they won at West Virginia in overtime 55-42, and that was a good win because West Virginia is a decent Big 12 team, and that was a really good win on the road. Then they won at Houston 48-30, and that was a good win because Houston is a decent American Conference program. Then they beat Duke 35-27, and Duke's having a pretty good season in the ACC, so that was a good win for Kansas. Then they won over Iowa State 14-11 in a defensive slugfest, and that was a good win because Iowa State is also a decent Big 12 program. Then they lost to TCU 38-31, not a bad loss. TCU's having a great season, and they barely lost to TCU, and they almost won. Then they lost at Oklahoma 52-42. Not a bad loss either because Dylan Gabriel did return for Oklahoma in this game, and they just lost in an offensive explosion. Then they lost at Baylor 35-23. Not a bad loss. Baylor's a decent team, but Kansas did kind of struggle in this game. Then they beat Oklahoma State 37-16. That was a good win because Oklahoma State has been struggling lately, and that was a good win for Kansas. Then they lost at Texas Tech 43-28. And again, not a terrible loss. There's not really a bad team in the Big 12, and any team can beat you at home. And Texas Tech, even though they've kind of had an up and down season, Texas Tech is a really good team at home, so not too bad of a loss there. And in that Texas Tech game, quarterback Jason Bean at 270 yards, 3 touchdowns, an interception, 10 rushing yards, and a touchdown. He's filling in for Jalen Daniels, who's been out at quarterback for Kansas with an injury. And Jason Bean is a really great, talented backup quarterback, and now he's their starter again. And he was their starter last year, but he's a very solid quarterback, very talented. He can run, he can throw, and he does a lot of things for the Kansas offense. Running back Devin Neal at 190 yards. He's been playing fantastic lately for Kansas. He's been an electric running back for Kansas, running all over the field. Wide receiver Lawrence Arnold at 110 yards, very talented wide receiver for Kansas. And on the defensive side of the ball, safety Kenny Logan Jr. at 8 tackles, and defensive end Lonnie Phelps at 5 tackles for Kansas against Texas Tech. And Kansas's offense and their defense is much better than it used to be. Their defense is really solid. They've given up a lot of points in some games against really talented offensive teams, but their defense can play, and their offense is much better than it used to be when they really just struggled as a whole team altogether. But Kansas is much better now. So who do I think is going to win this game? This is an interesting game because Kansas is having one of their best seasons in over a decade, and this is fantastic for Kansas because they have a lot of momentum as a program. And even though they've lost 4 of their last 5 games, they're still a really good team. They're playing really good football this season, and they have been very competitive in almost every game that they've played this season. and Lance Leipold's done a really good job to get Kansas playing really good football. But Texas is the more talented team. Texas has so much talent on their team. Every year we know how much talent Texas has. They're way more talented than Kansas, and Steve Sarkisan has a really good team on offense and defense. But Texas has been really inconsistent this season. At times they look like a top 15 team, and at other times they don't look like a top 25 team at all. But the other thing with Texas is they've been much better on the road this year. They seem to have struggled a bit more at home. But I think Kansas is going to beat Texas 24-21. And this game is at Kansas, and the home field advantage is going to help Kansas because their home crowd has been really turning out since Kansas is playing better football. And even though Texas has been playing better on the road this year, and they have a lot more talent than Kansas, I think Kansas is going to find a way with Lance Leipold at head coach with his team, and they're playing really good football. I think they're going to find a way to beat a very inconsistent Texas team, and Steve Sarkisian has a very talented team, but they're just very inconsistent, and I think Kansas is going to beat Texas 24-21. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below whether you think Texas or Kansas is going to win this game and why, and I will see you next time.